Recording on your side, you do it. There we go. Okay, so thank everybody. The last session of the day, and this next session here, there we go, popped up. We're going to be talking about more from like if you're a CXO, if you're like a vice president, director, you know, a boss, you're leading the team. This is the session that helps you, understand where you should be putting your focus. And it's not hard. It's clear the path. Give your team time, right? So the key thing is learning from key principles that executives can do to set up a principle of rhythm inside the organization to increase your security posture, right? Ordering people around and putting down the hammer and imposing impossible requirements to your team and yelling at the vendors, that's actually an example of weak leadership. It doesn't get anything done, right? It doesn't really help at all, right? This session is providing the suggestions for leaders who want to aspire to have really awesome security practices, right? That's the idea with it. And it's not loud. It's not, you're not out for glory, right? But it's powerful, right? And it's subtle, and it makes a strong, tight organization that withstands issues going on. And this is kind of based off of my experience coming in and out of executive leadership roles over the years. Looking back, I've been in and out of doing security work for 40 years now. This is 35 years, but 40 years. So there's a lot of time in the trenches sort of work with it, right? So these things we've seen before, our threat vectors changed. It's a force of nature, right? So we already talked about that. Focus on the people, not the actual weapon. We can also use behavior, right? So you got to understand when you do people, then you can kind of say, okay, what am I trying to do? Make it hard. And you heard it there. What's interesting, you find the same thing. That reporter asking Ian, in that video I showed during the break, was at, and he's at GCHQ, right? UK top security agency. And he said, our job is to make it harder for people to go after our infrastructure. He didn't say make it impossible. He said make it harder, make them work hard, right? Because he as a security professional is putting a thought on the right issue, which is not focusing on the widgets, focus on the person who's trying to break in and invade and spy and do all the different things you would do. So he's, that's the sort of area with it. Now with this, we have to rethink some of the traditional security stuff. Sometimes we get caught into a habit of going down and the ladder is on the wrong wall and we're doing the wrong things, right? So we have to think differently. So a good example of learning how to think differently is this is on Netflix right now. Go watch this. This is American baseball. It's the Oakland A's. It's talking about how the Oakland A's figured out a totally different system because they didn't have the money to compete, and they rethought everything, changed the game, right? Because in security, if all the threats we're facing, we can't stand up to it. We got to rethink the game and play it differently, right? So game is stacked against us. We need to rethink it and redo it, right? So here's 10 quick principles. Number one is people say, oh, I'm going to think about security in my organization. Don't think security, think resiliency, all right? That's why I call myself today, I'm a resiliency engineer, because resiliency engineer is not only about if it's a DDoS, if it's a ransomware, or if it's a fire, or if it's a hurricane, it's resiliency. How do I keep the system and my service up and running in a time of crisis? That's resiliency. So you're covering all the elements of security, but you're keeping focus on the core problem. I got a business and I got a service, and customers I got to take care of. How do I make sure I serve that need? So I have a resiliency playbook, a DDoS resiliency playbook, a ransomware resiliency playbook, a APT resiliency playbook, right? A hurricane resiliency playbook, right? That sort of thing, right? Next thing is really trust the team. And sometimes this is really hard. You kind of look, you're working with, as an executive, you're working with your team day in, day out. But sometimes you go like, okay, I want to hire somebody different. I'm tired of these people. That's a wrong thing to do. The people who work there know the system best. And they're the ones to trust, and they're the ones to empower, right? And I've seen organizations that get broken, and one of the core brokenness a lot of times is the executive leadership is not trusting their team, and the team knows how to fix things, but the team is not empowered, right? So you got to trust your team. Third thing is consistent rhythm of actions versus trying to do something big. Sometimes, oh, I'm going to come in here and fix this. I'm going to do this big thing. But the big thing is not everything you need. What you need is a consistent rhythm, right? You just get a consistent rhythm, and it's not sexy, and it's not like shiny, and sometimes you can't get promoted with it, but it gets the job done. You get a more resilient, more secure, more robust solution out of it versus going through and forcing people to work 16-hour days for a whole week trying to fix a problem that doesn't need to be fixed that way. You empower broadly across the entire organization. You turn everybody into a security professional, everybody into a resiliency person. So for instance, I take example one over at Juniper Networks. Juniper runs a lean operation, so you're not going to get tons of people inside of a team. So a small team for the security incident response team. But what I did is I set it up where every engineer and every field person can actually report a suspected security vulnerability. Everyone. And so I went through and did my training where my frontline security finders was everybody in the company. So I took through training where we trained everybody. Here's how we get things, here's how we find it. If you find something you suspect, you put it into the bug, so you create a bug on it, and then we used a common vulnerability scoring system, and that person who reported it put what they thought the score is. So we trained them to like put the bug in, here's the basics of CVSS, they didn't have to be perfect, and flag it. So then it comes into the CERT team, right? And instead of having like spending lots of money on equipment and this test and that test and things like that, I had, you know, hundreds of people reporting suspected issues, and we'd be able to find things and find things and find things, right? So you turn everybody into it, and everybody felt part of it, right? So then more people were thinking about security because we were including everybody, right? Leverage your open source tools as much as possible in open source capabilities. You heard a lot about Shadow Server because Shadow Server is one of the most underutilized big impact benefit to organizations out there, right? So there's, and the key thing is doing open source first gets you to a point where you actually understand more what you may need to buy. It doesn't say you're not going to buy it. Like for instance, if you don't have enough net flow in, go get Team Cumry's Nimbus, all right? Or another piece of open source NetFlow tools, right? And you know, you get your servers and you go out there and deploy it, and you start pulling down NetFlow across the network. And then you start finding out what works and what doesn't work. And then the bosses says, we need better reporting. He says, well, I can't do it open source, but the vendor over here has a nice tool. Okay, then I know what to buy, and you're informed because you did the open source path first. Right. And managers have to like be willing to do that, you know, because what happens in this step 5 all the time is let me drop back. In this step 5 leverage open source is you say, I have a budget, I need to spend it. I want a fancy tool, give me a fancy tool, and you buy a fancy security tool and nobody uses it. Seen that so many times in an organization. We'll buy a fancy security tool. When's the last time somebody logged in? Oh, 6 months ago. And we just spent $500,000 on that tool. Okay, how much open source code could I bought, right, to get the job done? The other thing is, don't wait for governments and law enforcement to solve the problem. Take charge. You got shareholders and customers you have to take care of. Go out there and collaborate with the industry and actually push against the badness that are out there. Focus on the right security problems too. Don't get lost by vendors coming in and saying, scary, 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 scary. Look, I got graphs. It's scary out there. You know, You get lost in the widgets and the data and not realize, okay, who is attacking me? Who's stealing money from me? Who's doing fraud from me? Who's trying to extort money from me? So you notice that who, it's a person. Understand the human factors around it, all right? Don't assume your security tools are also working. I mean, just because you have a fancy tool and you hire vendors in there, the security tools may not work. Remember the exercise I gave as an example of where you go up to somebody in a department, you want them part of your security team, and you don't tell them it's an exercise. You say, there's an APT actor. We think that's in your system. We need your help to help people find it. Can you start, let's start figuring out how to do audits, right? So that's a exercise of not assuming the security tool is working like we think. We assume that maybe the security tool is not working. Let's go check. Let's go with that assumption that it's not working. Now, if you go in there and you find out everything's working, fantastic. If you go in there and you find out that it's not working, great. I just plugged a hole, right? Or uncovered a problem that's going to take a while to fix. Attacks will happen. Be prepared. The business recover quickly. As I pointed out in the last session, that's a good couple of slides to use where you show, breaches happen and companies recover because they were prepared, right? And a lot of the preparation we talked about here isn't going out there and buying lots of stuff. When you bring vendors in to actually talk a lot of this, you're going to find, oh, you need to buy this, and need to buy that, and need to buy, basically the stuff that I'm advocating buying is a stack of servers, so you can load open source code on it, right? So that's been the big advice on that. And then security is a community effort. You can't do it alone, right? So as an executive leader, if you go in with these 10 points, these 10 principles, it will be part of you helping to have a totally different attitude to the organization with it. And you bring in example of community collaboration. It's like for instance, a community in New Zealand collaborated with NZ CERT to come up with this ransomware incident model. This is a great tool. The tool set that being used for earlier in the last session, I gave the introduction with the Iranian state actors doing the ransomware work, that advisory that came out today. And they're using MITRE ATT&CK. And MITRE ATT&CK, I always scratch my head with, even though it evolved from work that, me and a whole bunch of other people were working on, 15 years ago, right? But then I kind of realized that the path we were on made it more and more complicated. So I look at it, I get complicated. But then I look at this. So tomorrow I'm going to actually go for my organization, use that tool, and then use this New Zealand model because it's simpler. It's a simpler way of doing it. And I have to go to executives inside my organization, right? And if I use the MITRE ATT&CK model, they'll go like, huh? Okay, I'm confused. What do I need to do again? Where I can use this, I can say, I can put little dots. We need to plug a hole here, plug a hole here. Here's the tool here's the tool we use here. And they'll go, oh, okay. Thumbs up, go get it done, right? That sort of thing. And again, advocate this over and over again. Get your daily reports. Use it, plug the holes. There's a whole bunch of things that it'll take care of. So next phase for the CXO, steps to prepare. So like right now, we're in this cyber war situation. APRICOT is going on right now with the Ukrainian Russian crisis, with the Russians invading, in Ukraine. So we have this situation going on. So if I'm a CXO, here's what I'm going to be doing, right? So if I was in a leadership position or advising somebody in a leadership position, first thing I do is says, what services are critical to me? What's important, right? And I got to make sure I go through my business continuity plan, because security playbooks, the DDoS incident playbook, the ransomware incident playbook, the APT incident playbook, the zero-day vulnerability incident playbook. These are different security playbooks you should have ready to go, is part of your business continuity plan. The business continuity plan auditors don't ask for that, but it should be part of it, right? So you gotta know this, because this is where you have your levers and your adjustments into it. And then pull together a workshop. Now we're in a crisis, but I think some of us are talking in the organization I'm in right now that to have a little a longer powwow. We've been having daily powwows where we come together and we're doing our checks and we're consulting with each other about what next things need to do. And that is, the path is cleared by the executive management I'm reporting up to, right? And across the organization, because it's a multi-stakeholders, right? So this path is clear all the way up to our CEO to say, okay, have your little work teams and go work on it. So this is kind of like we're in crisis mode. But these workshops started 3 weeks ago in my organization, right? We started doing these what ifs. And some of them from the business continuity is what ifs is we have employees who are Ukrainian. We have employees who are Russian, right? We have to take care of them and their families, right? So some of this sort of work with this, whether it's DDoS and business continuity in a crisis, these things will come out in those workshops. People didn't think of it at that time, right? Go through and start consulting with your alliance members, your DDoS defense alliances. Now, in us, we're a vendor where we provide services. So for us, it's two directions. One direction is to our customers. So we are an alliance partner to all our customers, right? So we're taking care of that part. We're also an alliance partner in the community. So our community, including our competitors, we are having big consultations going on to collaborate with each other for the best interest of the internet and all our customers, right? So that level of collaboration is the sort of thing that gets us through this crisis mode, right? With the potential cyber war. You could do the same thing. I give the story of 88 Boat Quay in Singapore. So Boat Quay, if you've been to Singapore, you got Boat Quay, you got Clark Quay. If you've been to Boat Quay, it's a whole set of restaurants and bars. So 88 Boat Quay was the first cyber cafe in Singapore. It opened up in early 1995. And the early internet community that was starting up in 93, 94, when we had competitors, like I was at Singtel, we had Pacific Internet, we had Cyberway. Every Friday, we headed to 88 Boat Quay. All the engineers, we all headed to 88 Boat Quay. Everybody knew each other. Everybody talked to each other. We would compete in the press, we'd compete for customers, but we would collaborate behind the scenes, right? That became our DDoS. I mean, because we had some early DDoSes then, 95, 96, we had some DDoS attacks in Singapore, and it was shoved off because we all collaborated with each other, right? Got on the phone with each other, set up a conference bridge. We started, putting access lists on the routers, and, we defended ourselves, right? So that level of collaboration, that's what you invest in. And what you find is that level of collaboration is fun, because the effort of building the weed, building that knot that's illustrated there, you build some good relationships with peers in the industry. That's powerful. That's long lasting. The other thing the executives got to do is make sure everybody can talk to each other in a crisis. Set up your emergency contact list. Does everybody have the phone numbers, emails, home numbers, contact information for everybody within the organization, all your DOS alliance partners, your upstream providers, and ideally set it up where it is in a non-electronic format, like print it out in multiple locations so you can get access to it. Because you never know when something happens, like floods, natural disaster stuff, things like that. And, my battery's gone. Well, what do I do? I got a landline. Oh, everything was on my phone. All my contact list is on my phone. My phone, and the battery's out because the power's out. Right. So that's the sort of thing where you think through checking out. Then with that list of all the different partners in the alliance stuff, set up regular meetings, set up regular sync ups. All right. So you have these regular sync ups that are set up. Right. So in different communities that do it in different ways. Right. So for instance, the community I talked about with all the anti-DDoS vendors, ISOI is a lot of times where we are meeting and talking to each other. We go to a security conference and our bosses kind of know we're all talking to each other. because we're comparing like what's going on with the bad guys and things like that. All right. Build up your escalation plan. So an executive has to be able to escalate and react. And in the executive position, you have the technical team going out there doing their part. And a lot of times you just focus on the technical team and you miss out that you got others you have to inform. So you remember in the slide I put in there, you had swim lane on DDoS, swim lane on ransomware. So this is to the Ukrainian crisis. Swim lane on taking care of APT sort of, vulnerabilities, things like that. Then you have a swim lane on customer communication and a swim lane on the PR and the press, right? Because the slide I showed where you had the different data breaches and those companies recovered, the market recovered, it's because of this stuff here. Your crisis communication escalation plan, where you have in your PR, your marketing team come in, and you have people in your team here. Like NASDAQ has this good guide that you can give to somebody, right? I'll put the link into a version here. I forgot to put the link in here of who you put into those teams. It's public relations, it's marketing, it's legal, it's product management, it's, there's a security person in there, yes, but you notice all the other people. And the security person is making sure that whatever message they put out to the press, is not making you liable. That's what the legal people do. It's powerful. The marketing people gets the words out, and the security person makes sure it's accurate security-wise, right? And that's part of the crisis process. And so if you get a DOS attack, this team needs to be activated to go out there and do their bit. Keeps everybody calm, keeps press calm. Otherwise, you're going to get, after the fact. And then the next one on step 7 is what techniques work now? Don't go out there. I think I mentioned this last session. Don't go out there and try to actually rebuild your DDoS infrastructure in the middle of the crisis. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Like for instance, if you call up the anti-DDoS vendors, they all have emergency onboarding processes. They can get you on as fast as possible, but it will disrupt operations. So what you want to look at is what are the simple tools I can do right now without disrupting operations. And then you can say, okay, this will be a cool idea to do later. Write it down. Let's do that later. What can I do right now? What's my toolkit right now? Hey, I can do this other tool. That's good, because when you bring vendors in, vendors are always going to say, oh yeah, I can help you. Here's how much it will cost. That's what a vendor is always going to do that. I can help you. Here's how much it will cost. Right. And a lot of times you can take care of things just by, having this plan and having this kind of like philosophy with it. And your job as an executive is to be that, light in the storm. Here's where we need to go. Right. Let's not try to over engineer this. Let's make sure we focus on the priorities. That's a cool idea. Write it down. Let's address it after the crisis. That's another cool idea. Let's write it down. I don't want to lose any idea. I don't want to lose any ideas, but we write them all down. This is cool. Good. But here's the things we focus on right now that we can do right now. Then if you have time, practice and practice and practice. Prepare for the expected DOS attacks, right? They now called cyber range because they had a bunch of Beltway Bandits. So Beltway Bandit is a term from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., you have this highway that goes around, the city called the Beltway. And the Beltway Bandit are consultant agencies who work for the U.S. government, right? They call Beltway Bandits. And some Beltway Bandits took a traditional, we call them red team, blue team exercises. So the red team will be the hacker, and the blue team would be all the people who are defending. And in '94, when we were building Singapore Telecom SingNet, I set up my first, we only had a few people, but every Saturday, we had to work half-day Saturdays at the time. It was something Singapore did. So we had to do a half-day Saturday. And so we took the half-day Saturdays and we basically did red team, blue team exercises. So I had this one engineer, Matthias Kober, and said, okay, Matthias, you're going to lead the red team. You and these two other engineers will be the red team. He goes like, I don't know how to hack. What do I do? Okay, go out and download 2600. 2600 is a hacker's magazine. It'll teach you how to break into things, right? It's out there. You can download it. It's one of the articles to read. So he downloaded 2600 and he started he started going through it page by page. They set up an attack, and then we set up a little network, just like on this, we set up a little network environment, and the blue team would defend it. And we were training. That's how we trained. And the team got ready. And then, we would get attacked and defend. And they all said that, we were prepared because we would train, practice, 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 right? So this is really, really important. You can set up all these tools, but if you don't train, they get, the tools become obsolete. They get rusty, right? Or they don't work, or the configuration doesn't work anymore, right? The next step on step 9 is report, work with the police. We can catch the bad guys, right? I pointed out in a session 2 days ago on from the DD4BC, which I'll do another special video on, and just sign up to my LinkedIn, keep an eye out, and we'll announce it, and it will go on my YouTube on the breakdown of these recommendations to be able to fight back. Here's the data you need to collect it. Here's how you collect the data. Here's how you set up your architecture around it. So that way you can go out there and help the industry, private industry who's doing the investigation with law enforcement, find the culprits and arrest them, because it does work, right? And then prepare for the future. Think resiliency, not security. What's my resiliency capability for the future? How do I build a more and more resilient system to the threats I'm going to have? And the threats I'm going to have isn't just security. It's going to be things like environmental issues and things like that, or like in Tonga, natural disasters like a volcano, those sort of things. So this is a session that there's an offer. If you have a bunch of executives like this, a session like this, and you need them to start thinking like security, just contact me, right? Contact me, and I'm happy to get on with organizations to help them kind of think through their security mindset, right? Because any organization we can help out with to help increase their security thinking and posture is going to help the entire internet. So that's an offer to everybody out there. So that is it for our sessions. So now this is the time period where all your different questions that you have been waiting to ask, you can now ask. And on any of the sessions that happened before, or any of the things I haven't covered that you'd like to hear, I'm all ears to anybody wants to talk. And with this silence, which is okay, it's expected. The other thing to be mindful of is ask the questions. So I'll give you guys let me give you guys a story for being a really shining example of an engineer in Asia Pacific, because I've been Singapore second home, lived and worked in Indonesia, lived and worked in Korea. So I've been around the region, and will continue to go around the region. And the engineers who really shine, they break through one barrier. And that barrier is the ability to go and seek out knowledge and ask questions. So a story that, so here I'm working in Indonesia. I'm working, I got Moratel and SmartFriend that I'm kind of going back and forth between a fixed line system and a mobile system. And our big boss said, okay, we're going to go to 4G. So we're a 3G network that says we're going to go to 4G. And we only have a short time period to build a design and build an RFP. We're like, everybody's going like, whoa, what are we going to do? So I said, no problem. Let's just do an offsite, and we'll pull the whole engineering team off to an offsite. We'll spend 4 days, and we'll go get it done. So we found a hotel with really good internet connectivity. We all went off to an offsite. And the first thing I showed everybody, it says, okay, here, look, I'm going to take this. We're dividing up the task. Everybody's got to work on a particular module of the design and questions and things like that. So, okay, so here, watch me. This is what I'm going to do. Here's one of the areas I have to figure out, right? And I'll go over to LinkedIn, and I know that Verizon is doing this, and Sprint is doing this, and Vodafone's doing this. So I'm going to look for engineers there who do this. And watch, I'm going to introduce myself on LinkedIn and ask them a question to say, hey, can we get on the phone and talk to each other? Can we get on Skype? And we got these questions, we're coming up with a design issue around it. And they're going like, okay. And it just took a couple of hours and I started getting responses. You know, I sent out queries to 5 different engineers. I had 3 engineers say, yeah, let's get on the phone and talk. And I had several of them listen in to the conversation I was having, because they're saying, how'd you guys do this? How do you select a vendor for this? What's the things we need to look for? What's the things going on with this? What, you know, the 3GPP documents are hard, you know, confusing. And say, yeah, it's confusing. So look at this one and this one. Oh, cool. All right, good. All right. And so within 12 hours, I had 3 conversations with 3 people who knew what they were doing. They've done it, they deployed it, and had interests in information. See, team, this is how we're going to achieve our goal in a short time period. We're going to achieve our goal in a short time period by going out there, and all you guys are going to ask questions, and we're going to learn from everybody. And that's what they did. And people were amazed at what we came up with. They were going like, no, this team of people, there was like 30 of us. This team of people can't do that. It's not going to work. This idea is not going to work. And when we came back, you know, the big boss, the owner of the company, he was amazed. He's like, you guys did all this in 40. Look at, these are detailed questions. He says, yeah, because we went and everybody asked for help. And it was a big change for you know, them to kind of like be that bold. But then afterwards, it was amazing with the organization. They kept on asking. They go like, this is actually pretty cool. I'm going to keep on finding out for more engineers and to ask more questions out there. And it really fired up the entire team. All right. So in the security space, it's got to be the same way. So my big advice to everybody here, you really want to like up your level as a security professional, just get in the habit of like asking. And you notice on there, I put my, you know, put it on the screen. Oh, I'll just drop it into the chat. But my contact information is all right there. All right. Now, cell phone wise, if you call me directly on my cell phone, I probably, you know, because United States would get these spam calls all the time. So a lot of times I don't answer directly on the phone number. But if you call me on Signal or WhatsApp, I respond. Right. So, you know, and then it doesn't mean I know what's going on with it or have the answer for you, but I know I will know somebody who can answer your question. If it's doing anything in security or on the networking side, I know, you know, because I maintain it for my network. I got to know these people too. Right. So, so things like that. Okay, Saeed, you asked about source remote trigger black hole. Since we have some extra time here, let's do this. There are some, we got slides out there. Responding to attacks, remote trigger black hole. I will share these slides here, and that I'm going to show real quick. And that way you can pull them up. And this is going to be the slide deck that will be evolved with updating on the remote trigger black hole. So let me just copy the link over here. And then I'll jump into screen share. So that's the link in there. And then I'm going to share the screen here and jump into here. And let me give everybody a quick lesson on, I'm going to jump forward in different slides on remote trigger black hole. So remote trigger black hole, we're using a routing protocol to redirect traffic, right? It's kind of, we mentioned this before, all right? Now, let's make sure everybody had, that's why I got to update this. This is old slides. These don't exist anymore. FTP engine in Cisco doesn't exist anymore. So I got to update these. But they're still good illustrations. So here's how you set it up. You have a trigger router. And on all the routers on the edge of your network, you set up a IP route. So IP route, we were using the test network IP address. So there's a bunch of addresses that are reserved for different functions. And the 192.0.2.1 is called the test network. So we use that in remote trigger black hole to set the null zero. And then I configure my trigger router, plug it into the mesh, and then I can activate it. So on all the routers on the edge, right, I put this static route, set it to null zero, okay? Then, so on all the routers on the edge, I set it up out there, right? Then I got a trigger router. Now, a trigger router today, in the old days, I would set up like an old 2500, like in 2000. Today, I would use free range routing, right? So I'd set up a little box with free range routing on it. So free range routing is like open source routing code. And you can run networks on it. And Google runs it all over their network, right? They don't run most of the network, they want routers, they run free range routing on a Unix box, right? So here, and free range routing is a fork off of Quagga. So you had Zebra, the Quagga, and then it forked off the free range routing, right? So that's your trigger router. So then on the trigger router, if this was a Cisco, you would set up a little route map like this. Here's a route map, match a tag, set next hop to the test net, set the local pref, set community no export. Can't leave your network, right? And then there's my little route map. So then when it's activate the black hole, I just add a route. Take this route, because this is being attacked, 172.19.61.1, and I put the tag in. So then it will go through, right? So here's how it's all glued together, right? So you have your BGP rib, you have your static route, and then it gets glued together in the route and information base, in the FIB, in the forward information base, and it gets glued together where then 172.19.61 equals null zero, and it gets dropped. So that's a destination-based black hole, right? So the way BGP is sent, the static route is there, it gets glued together. So you can see the 61.1 equals the 2.1 equals null zero, and then that's how you forward it to null zero. So that's a basic black hole, destination-based, right? And you've now pushed it to the edge. And then if you take a community string and you want to push it to the next hop, like if I was connected to NTT, I can say, take this route and then send it. So I would put another route map and then I would send it over to NTT and NTT would drop it on their edge, right? So you can send it up the hub. And then if you wanted to connect it to others, you can send it into others. So you can take your trigger router and set up different rule sets with it. So that's destination based, right? There's some other slides and things with that. So now with SourceSpace. So SourceSpace, remember, I was working with instigating tools so we can easily do SourceSpace. So we can do source address validation. Unicast RPF strict mode is one of the tools. And postmortem to 2000, at February 2000, I gave a story, those of you who heard me earlier in the week, gave a story in February 2000, Nanog, Paul Ferguson and I sitting next to each other, waking up, listening to this, the Beltway at the keynote, and then the Mafia Boy attack happened. So then the next day, we're recovering from that attack and we're all consulting and talking. And the day after that, I started calling everybody up. What did you do? And from that, I kind of realized that the different techniques that people were using, we needed something fast. And I threw something in the lab that says, I wonder if I can take the null zero and with the destination base, and how would a RPF work with that? And then realized that if I removed the strict part of it, just did the FIB check, not the MAC, the interface check, because strict mode does the FIB check and the interface check, they glue it together. If I just took the interface part out, then we can just do the source check and say, oh, I think this will work. So I did some lab work and said, this will work. And I bounced it off of my boss at the time, Steve Johnson, and said, yeah, this will work. And then went out there and we got some experimental code, pushed out there, it worked. And then we started rolling it out. That's SourceSpace. So what we're doing now is we got like, there are 4 flavors of it out there right now. There's strict mode, there's loose mode, right? Loose mode was designed for SourceSpace remote trigger black hole. Then there's feasible path. And the reason why there's feasible path is the forwarding architecture in Junos is different. And so they had to come up with a different method of doing the forwarding architecture. So that's feasible path. And then there's VRF mode. And VRF mode is so you can do source address validation on your peering edge at full line rate if you get the appropriate chipset to do it, right? So what we're doing with strict mode, right, is I'm checking the interface from the packet, right, with unicast RPF strict mode. So I could do BCP. So I'd taken, here's my route, here's my interface, and I put the 2 of them together. Does the source address match the adjacency? That's what I'm checking. I'm checking the adjacency and the source together, right? So that's what I'm checking the 2 of them together, right? If it's not coming in from that particular interface, then it fails, right? Loose check does the source exist? Is it equal to null 0? That's it. I don't care which interface it came in from. That's loose check. And that allows me to do the same trigger, but then it will drop the source coming in with the match. So on that particular interface, it will drop on the source. What the VRF mode does, we got 2 modes you can do with VRF mode. You create a VRF for that line card. And then what you can do is you can say, okay, if not exist, then drop. And this is interesting. So what you do with this is you say, all my routes coming from my peer. So if I'm connected to NTT, I'm peering with NTT. Here is a routing agreement I do with peer and DB for NTT. So I receive these routes from NTT. And with RPKI, it says, these are my routes I receive, right? This is my peering agreement. That comes in, that's my peering policy. I then take a copy of that policy, I stick it into a VRF. Now on the physical interface, that 100 gig interface I'm connected to NTT, I now check the sources. And all the sources coming from NTT must match the peering policy. So understand, this is on an exchange point, right? This is on a private peering point. Every source packet coming in matches the NTT routing information that says this is what NTT will send to me. NTT will send me packets with these routes that equal these sources. That's what the VRF mode is. So when people say, I cannot do source address validation on my peering edge, BS, you can do it. You just got to take the time and engineering and make sure the routing equipment can do this, because it will require a hefty ASIC to do it. You can't, this is not like easy code with it. The other way of doing it is then I take that policy and says, drop it, right? So I can put like a special black hole filters out there, right? And then that same VRF can be used with FlowSpec and can put even more information in there with the FlowSpec work. So now with the SourceSpace drop, I can, customers are, I can drop based off of the source. Right, so that's your question out there, SourceSpace, Motrigger Black Hole, that said your question on there. This is kind of how it works. And these slides I just sent to you, and there's more in there, right? And there's more information about how, like, for instance, this is a whole breakdown from Josh Schneider on NTT's architecture of how they set up the communities across the global network for doing black holes. It's a really good case study of what you can do from a deployment standpoint of how they set things up, and including with the route maps and things like that. So that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it. And so we did a good diversion. and you guys got access to the slides, and these slides are they're still old. So I'm going to be cleaning them up and redoing things and talking to a bunch of different providers, and finding the few providers who do VRF mode. And it's surprising how many people don't know that VRF mode is there, and they have routing equipment that actually supports VRF mode. If we get more peering sessions doing VRF mode, it would be really interesting. So, okay, thank you everyone for coming. Again, be brave, ask the questions. You know, the story I gave, kind of like, it's one of the key things of you know, succeeding in the industry is just the worst thing that can happen to you when you go ask a question of somebody is silence, right? Or you get a Randy Bushed. Randy Bushed is, idiot, go read this document. It's like, oh, Randy just gave me the document to read. Thank you. Most of the time what you get is like, hey, let's talk. Let's have a beer. Let's figure things out. So, Philip, I think that's it.
Thank you, Barry. No more questions? Doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
I think people have been questioned out after 5 days.
Of course.
So been long, it's long haul. Well, for you, especially, you know, in a normal week, this is probably quite doable for you. But if you seem to be up all hours, pretty much dealing with the current global situation.
With the crisis, but it's also, it was also fun this week to tune it for the crisis. It gives a little bit of a flavor.
Well, that's, I suppose it's good timing, bad timing in both senses. So anyway, so thank you very much for that, Barry. Thank all the participants as well for listening, watching, and the questions. Really appreciate that. Just to note that this recording will be on the website. All the recordings for the week so far are on the website already. So if you missed any bits of Barry's session, or you want to go over Barry's explanations again, they're all there for you to enjoy all over again. And of course, all the presentation slides are on the website as well. So please go and enjoy. Before we finish, want to recognize the Internet Society for being our training partner this whole week. Really appreciate that support. Thank you to Internet Society for that, as ever. And that brings us to the end of 5 days of DDoS Resiliency Workshop. Thank you very much, Barry.
Thank you. And remember, these slides we're setting them up as Creative Commons, so that way, if those of you who attended, you also got the link to the Google Docs. If you don't have it, just ping me. You know where I'm at. And then if you go like, oh, I need to get some slides for my boss to convince him how to do something. Mind the slides, cut and paste. They'll go like, wow, how'd you get all these slides? Oh, yeah, that's okay. I got my secrets. But then you can win the argument, and then you got better security.
All right. Thanks, Barry.